Hey, hey, hi, hi, ho, ho. Harry Brailsford here with SMB Nation, Microsoft 365 Nation, and a whole bunch of other brands. Today is the big reveal. It's MSP Tech Talk. It's winter term. Forgive me, it's actually spring quarter. Forgive that. Oh, well, never summer. How about we say it's never summer term? And we're going to jump right into the Microsoft 365 Nation word. Hey, if I could have the panelists mute out, please. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Jenny, I'll put in my headset to kill my feedback. Okay, is that better? Yes, Harry. Yes, it is. All right. So the agenda is introductions with an overview of the site, survey data that I want to share with you, contributors and open forum. If I could, Jenny, if you could mute out the other people, I'm getting feedback. Let's see. I'll go ahead and do it. Josh, there we go. All right, everybody's muted. And then we'll hear from our contributors and have an open forum. So why are we here? So technically, we're here to have a conversation about the new pillars of Microsoft 365. Ironically, not surprisingly, more people like a 365 world with Windows and security and mobility than ever did small business server. While we appreciate the workloads of SBS, the world has changed and we've formed a community that is going to fly further and faster with M365 Nation. And then one lucky attendee is going to receive a signed copy of Jenn Reed's new book, Microsoft 365 Admins For Dummies. And we'll get that to you shortly. She could not make it today. She's in Toronto. But why are we really here? So we are really here because the reason we do what we do is steak dinners, okay? Don't kid yourself. Steak dinner, steak dinner, steak dinner. That's really why we're here in IT, is to be able to afford those. With that said, we have some contributors. So let me tell you, they're not just speakers, but they're contributors to the Microsoft 365 site, Microsoft 365 Nation site. So we'll go around the horn. Larry, why don't you briefly introduce yourself, and then we're going to bring you back in a little bit later. Go ahead.
Right, I have to unmute there. So I'm Larry Doyle. I'm based in Dublin, and I work as an MSP and consultant, primarily in cybersecurity, infrastructure, virtualization, storage, coming from the old days of SBS, storage craft, all that kind of stuff.
All righty, and hey, Larry, look at this. I have a hat from Dublin, Ireland. I believe I got on an evening out with you at Johnny Fox's Pub.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a must-do. Joshua Lieberman, I'm assuming you're back in Albuquerque. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Harry. Hey, it's Lieberman, by the way.
Lieberman, you get me every time.
Only been 18 years. I am home in Albuquerque, a little weak of voice, but otherwise doing well. And I'm sorry, you just want a general intro?
Yeah. What do you do for your day job?
Well, I guess my day job is running Net Sciences. We're a small MSP, 4 folks here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Been around as Net Sciences since '96. Before that, since 1990 as PC Services, and full service MSP for 10 to 15 years, arguably. It was about 2002, actually. We first started doing proactive services, which I cleverly named Proactive Services. And about 2009 or 10, we figured out we were an MSP.
All righty. And then Josh, once again, the last name, I always mangle it. Josh, I'm going to take a shot. Fryfield. Josh Fryfield. Did I get it today? And Josh will want to bring you off mute. I'll assist you with that. Josh?
Okay, yeah.
There we go.
Josh with Axon Tech. I'm an MSP like the others. I do focus quite a bit on security and compliance. I'm doing things like audits and HIPAA, that kind of thing. I also run a peer group for other MSPs. We meet once a month in Pasadena. I'm calling it SoCal IT Pro at the moment, and that's good as well. So we share ideas about how we're running our MSP businesses every month.
All righty, thank you. And then we have Mia Kate Kennedy on the line. Mia Kate, you recently exited a Spokane MSP, and you help us over at Microsoft 365 Nation. More importantly, you were the technical editor on the latest book, but please properly introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Mia Kate Kennedy the First. I'm in Spokane, Washington currently, but I've traveled all over. I ran a pretty healthy MSP in this area and continue to consult with several other MSPs in this area, and along with helping Harry, I'm working on some collaboration with him. So I recently was nominated to join the Security Coalition. I just found out today, so that's exciting as well.
Wow, well, right on. Okay, congratulations. Well, let's jump in.
Thank you.
Let me get back to where I belong. Let's talk about Microsoft 365 Nation. So folks, this was developed in the fourth quarter of 2018, silent launch, Q1, and now we're ready for the big reveal. We just kind of wanted to make sure that we had the kind of things you would expect to see. So let me walk you through it real quick. And I encourage you to go over and sign up and participate. So it's m365nation.com. Folks, I'm assuming you can see that on the screen. Please let me know if you can't. And I want to walk you through what it's all about. So first of all, it's a very different look than SMB Nation. And we have a welcome video right below the pay line. Plus, we switch out analysis and webinar content on page 1, so you see our variety. We have a word of the week and a question of the week. Now, let's get to the good stuff. The real deal here is the vault. Okay, this is where you want to hang out after you sign up. And I'm going to talk about why signing up is important. So the vault is where we host the video interviews, webinars such as this, white papers that you can download, the word of the week and the question of the week. So if we go to videos, I want to talk about that. What we decided, gang, is to work with our content, work with our contributors in a video format. So we want them to participate with us via video and not the written word as much. Now, we still have analysis and blogs and that kind of thing, but basically, this is where you can go and see 8-minute or less interviews with partners in the field. So this is a Fortinet partner out of Florida that I met with at Fortinet Accelerate a few weeks ago down in Orlando, followed by conversations with Exclusive Networks, a major security distributor overseas that works with Fortinet, and then finally the teaser and the good stuff. So Rudy Rodriguez, Chairman Emeritus of the IAMCP, so the Association for Microsoft Partners, met with him in Austin, Texas, and got his view of the world on security marketing. He consults to MSPs. Moving on, Davin Cook out of Austin, Texas, who has an identity management tool that fits very well in a 365 world. And I'll just scroll down. You guys get the point. There's Larry Doyle with his periodic contribution. Larry, probably going to call on you in a little while to get an update on GDPR and Brexit. That could be a whole webinar into itself. On and on and on. Mickey J and Ken Dwight will be on in a few weeks with the malware conversation. So, one more, guys. Finally, Jenn Reed, an interview and a review about her new book for dummies. And one lucky listener today is going to get a copy of that book. Jenn is a real firecracker. She's a consultant by day, author by night, finds herself in Toronto right now, and quite frankly, give the Dummies book a fair shake. I always learn something new with Dummies books every time, and they're often free in the booth. With that said, let me go to the analysis. Again, I encourage you on screen number 2 to go to M365 Nation, sign up, and make yourself at home. So with the analysis, we're looking for conversations that are relevant. For example, how partners can minimize challenges in getting the customers to go digital would be a shout out of a blog on that. Finally, what I'm going to show you for now are the answers. And here's our hope and desire. And I'm going to back it up with data, survey data in a moment. We want you to join our community, and we want you to ask questions about Microsoft 365, security, and so on. We have a couple of questions that have already been asked, but more importantly, if you scroll down, there's a place for you to ask your questions. And why is that important? That is important because our survey data, it told us it was important. So we have had a 365 community for well over 4 years, to be honest. And we survey the community most every year. So I picked 3 years as an example. And it was originally called Office 365 Nation. We've essentially retired that. It's now Microsoft 365 Nation, but it's the same motion, just taking it up to another level with Windows thrown in and mobility and enterprise security. In 16, you were about split. You told us when we are building a community that you essentially wanted it to be half technical, half business. 16. In 17, 1 year later, you told us, I want to know more about the internals of Office 365. I want to know more about technical topics. And then most recently in 2019, you told us that you're interested in business related conversations surrounding 365. That's actually not a surprise, because when we started this community, there was a legitimate conversation about what is 365, for lack of a better word. Then the next year in 17, you wanted to know more on the technical side. How do I do this? How do I do that? Now in 19, the conversation has shifted back to business, and it often relates to SKUs and the different formats for Office 365 itself and Microsoft 365. Moving on. In the community category, in 16, you wanted knowledge sharing. In 17, you wanted knowledge sharing. And in 19, you wanted knowledge sharing. What you're consistent, first of all, you're consistent with that. I got that. What you're also consistent with is the advocacy category. You are not excited in having what is now Microsoft 365 Nation take on advocacy issues. And guys and gals, I can totally appreciate that. You know, that's where I really want to encourage you to think about going to the CompTIA ChannelCon conference, typically late July, early August. CompTIA is much better set up for lobbying in Washington, D.C. on H-1B visas and other topics. There's another advocacy organization I'd like you to think about if you're a Microsoft partner called Voices for Innovation, VFI, and their job, again, relates to government affairs and advocacy. That's not really what we do, and you've told me that's not especially what you look to us for. It's not what gets you up in the morning. It's the knowledge sharing. Josh, to dovetail on your point that you periodically meet in Southern California with other IT pros to share ideas, that's what we're talking about right here, and the survey data backs it up. Now, a shout out to the folks that make it all possible, if you don't mind, and I appreciate you supporting those that support us. Fortinet has worked hand in hand with us for well over 6 months in developing this community. And as you can see from the content, we led with security. So there's the 3 legs, right? Office 365, there's the Windows component, mobility, and security. So we led out of the gate with security. And when we get to the open forum in particular, I'm going to call on Josh Fryfield about some of the other pillars and where we're headed with that in just a couple of weeks. But take a second to give a tip of the hat, if you will, to Fortinet. They are a well-trained, well-behaved community sponsor with a fantastic engineering reputation. Don't need our help on engineering. They've asked us to help them in terms of community involvement, and we're happy to do so. Now, moving at light speed, we're going to pop into the open forum, and we'll kind of go with a fire starter. So Josh, you've been a contributor to the Microsoft 365 Nation motion for a few months now, and I want to key in today in particular on a couple of topics. The first one would be a soon-to-come conversation on one of our MSP Tech Talk webinars in just a few weeks on end of support. And give me about a minute on that, and then I want to double click down into Windows 10, which again is one of the pillars of the 3 pillars of Microsoft 365 Nation. Josh, go.
Sure. So, I mean, we all know by now, or hopefully we know, that January 14, 2020 is going to be the end of extended support for both Windows 10 and Server 2008 and R2. So really, there's a huge greenfield. I've mentioned this before, but it's really the case that we need to move those clients that are still running Windows 7 onto Windows 10 and off of 2008 onto, say, 2016 or 2019, whatever you're comfortable with today. And not only is it due to security, right, because there isn't going to be any more patching, so therefore you're leaving those clients vulnerable, but it's also due to compliance. Almost all modern compliance has an element of patching, whether you're patching or not, and you basically fail that audit if you're not, so you're not going to be able to do that, therefore you're going to fail your audit immediately. So really, we need to get on that transition, as you said, to Windows 10.
Yep. And again, we're going to do that in about 3-4 weeks, folks. It's part of the MSP Tech Talk lecture series for spring quarter. Larry Doyle out in Dublin, Ireland, if you could kind of follow up on that, because we've had an interview, it's up on our site, about compliance. We kind of wove it into GDPR 1 year later, literally, Larry. What was it, April or May? I mean, is it literally a year this month? What's going on, man?
I don't know. It's like, I suppose the bigger organizations are still concerned with GDPR. There seems to be a foot off the pedal approach from the smaller businesses. We're relying, we try to create a baseline for clients, and starting off with data encryption with heavily reliant on encryption, disk encryption. Get that out there, get the auditing in place, data leakage prevention tools, data classification tools.
Yep.
And really, Microsoft has done a great job with Office 365 in providing a lot of compliance tools in the portal. It's just a matter of utilizing them. They're all kind of switched off by default, but there's a lot of engineering there that's really geared towards helping people become more compliant and become more aware of what data they have and how to protect it.
Yep, and we're keeping an eye from afar on how that's all going to shake out. I mean, economic events shake up. They're disruptive. Political events are disruptive, and it impacts all the way down to IT and the work that we do. Joshua Lieberman, got it right. Joshua, I saw you briefly in Chicago at the Channel Pro SMB Summit last week, and you attend many shows. I think you went to the Compass. Tell you what, why don't you tell me about the Compass? Then I have a very specific question about being an independent community with third-party recommendations. But shout out to the Compass event in late April in Chicago, if you don't mind.
Sure, it's IT Owners Compass was the name of the show. Lori Tishnai, Tisnai, was a show producer. It was their second year. It's more or less in the same format as a Channel Pro type show or SMB Tech Fest, although more in the sense that it's 2.5 days long, less in the sense that there were less than 100 attendees this year. it's a nascent show. There was a really high quality of presentations, even my own. They really did have good stuff. I did one called 30 Years in 30 Minutes about what I would do over if I started tomorrow, which included running off the stage in the first 5 seconds. But the show, for the most part, was extremely high quality. Everything hung together, nothing fell apart. She had very limited sponsorship, about a half a dozen vendors, and that's the one thing she's going to grow along with venue size for next year. Yesterday was the week after I had to fly back, which is why I'm sick. I came home on that flight and sat between a bunch of hacking, coughing kids, and my kryptonite is kids' diseases, so now I've got it. But the week after, which was last week, I was back in Chicago for Channel Pro, speaking on cybersecurity packaging, bundling, and selling.
Yep. Well, Joshua, what I want to key in on is we've certainly worked with you over the years at the in fact, MSP Tech Talk series and some other interviews. And the one thing I can always count on with you, and what I really want to emphasize to the audience today, is the Microsoft 365 Nation community is an independent community. I fancy ourselves, if I had any advocacy in me, which again, you, the readers, you, the community members have told me, place that down in a distant third place. But if I had any advocacy in me, it's not so much legislative activity, but it would be being an ombudsman back to Microsoft. Because I live in Seattle, in fact, tomorrow night I'm going to a fairly significant party on a rooftop for Microsoft Build. So Microsoft Build is more of a developer conference that's in town right now. And Joshua, I'm getting to the question, but what I fancy myself in my role and hopefully our community is to poke the bear occasionally. And you're really good. I mean, that's part of your stump speech is I'm going to offer your natural curiosity to find third-party solutions, give them a thumbs up, down. Why don't you tell me what's kind of led you to be that guy with some of your core security speeches? Because I want to bring that out of you.
Wow, that's a deep question. I guess because I'm curious. I like to speak and write. I like to travel, and I am always trying to find some way to weave a tighter mesh around our networks. Right now, we have about a dozen vendors involved in our basic security services, and if you go all the way out to the edge of what we offer, it's in the dozens. Every year, there's this constant dynamic struggle between reducing the vendor set and increasing the security of these networks. And as you know, the more vendors you deal with, the more problems you're going to have, especially in the era of M&A and repricing. I'll use that term. We're being repriced to triple by one of our vendors next month. We're having the edges of these products, which at sometimes overlap greatly. For example, you probably can't even get a pizza without an ID or a dark web scan nowadays. In other cases, those edges contract, and now there's gaps between your services because somebody moves on or you have to change vendors. There's this constant dynamic change or dynamism in offerings, efficacy, partner programs, pricing. So I just try to stay on top of it all, and I realized at some point I might as well share some of that experience. And that's really what I'm talking about this year and presumably next, is not SMB IT security per se, but how as an MSP or even as a fledgling MSSP to identify, vet, and then, as I said, weave these features and providers together.
Yeah.
So I guess the long answer is what I like to do.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that helps. Just had a conversation with a young person, in fact, my son's girlfriend, about maybe she wants to, in healthcare, and in healthcare, there's a significant return on investment to getting a graduate degree. And turns out she is not interested in doing that. And Joshua, what I told her by analogy was, well, then don't do it, because, you know, it's hard. And if you're not into it, don't do it. And you've kind of, you know, dovetailed into that you like to be curious, and that makes a hell of a difference to like what you're doing. Mia Kate, So next question's for you. And before I ask that, folks, if you could use, let me go back to the control panel. If you could use the questions feature to ask questions you have on Office 365 and other interesting topics. We do have a couple lined up already I'll get to. Sydney's asking about steak dinners. I'll get to that in a minute. Mia Kate, so you were in most recently a firm that had roots, and this is really cool. I love the story, and I even had the same conversation at the Channel Pro SMB Summit in Chicago last week with some people that walked up, and their firm was an older Chicago firm in the office equipment field, the office supply field, and they had pivoted to open an MSP practice. In fact, they were in motion. In fact, Mia Kate, I should connect you with them. So they were in motion to make that natural transition, a natural act. But my question to you is, given the reach that your firm had in Spokane, Washington, a long-time established office equipment company, you took them into the MSP world. They were recently acquired. What's the state of the union at the desktop level with clients when it comes to utilization at 365 and security and so on? I mean, is it the Wild West? What's your recollection out there with the customers?
Well, first of all, I have to needle you a little bit about the steak dinner because obviously I'm a vegetarian. So I got to keep up the money for those expensive avocados. So one of the things that I think it was Josh that said, the urgency to get clients to upgrade, you know, it was always a struggle to really get clients of any size. And I had clients all the way up to 500 end users to about 10, even a couple 1 or 2s just that I took on in another little town north of here. And, you know, it was a bit difficult struggle to get them to realize that, you know, you're going to be at an end game here real soon. And if you make the investment now, you're going to be a much further ahead. And for whatever reason, that sort of consultating with them, it didn't, I don't think it's just me, but I think in an MSP, it's very difficult to really get your clients to understand the urgency of those. And I think he's right. We do have an urgency to get them upgraded because they will fail these security audits. And once you kind of start saying that, they sort of open their eyes and say, oh, well, what do I need to do? But a lot of them wait till the very end. And then you're doing a lot of extra work on the MSP side to get them caught up because obviously they're not going to change to somebody last minute. And so I always found that kind of frustrating because we always gave them, I'm kind of curious too, so I always gave them plenty of opportunity to know when it was coming. I'd give them several hints. So there's that. And then to Joshua, it's so funny in technically editing how to be an MSP. The first thing I did was say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do this. So I've already done it, but I read the book and I was like, man, I forget how hard it is. I mean, it's not easy. It's fun and it's successful and it's really rewarding, but it definitely isn't easy. So I understand what you say about running off the stage because when I was editing it every night, I was like, nope, I'm not going to do it. So I think just as from a desk standpoint, I think getting your clients, you know, up to speed and sort of put that urgency of the next thing that's coming up as far as security goes is really important.
Yeah. And Mia Kate, shout out that you will be next week in Atlanta at the Sage show. A little bit different crowd, Sage Accounting, but you'll be in Atlanta, I believe, for 3 days. So folks, if anyone's in the region would like to meet with Mia Kate, it's all about community. That's what we're trying to build. We have questions. Let's jump into this. Is really the reason we're here. So let me, Sydney Thornton. Oh, okay. He's cracking a joke about, I thought it was about Cheetos. No, sir. No, sir. It's about steak dinners. Wade DeVore, boy, there's a name from yesteryear. Wade, thank you. Will there be training on the site? Yes, Wade, that is our intent. is to have relevant training. But I'll tell you the twist that I want, because I can, is third-party integrations. Because think of it this way. At the end of the day, we compete with the Microsoft Yammer groups, what used to be the Office 365 Yammer groups. Huge audience, of course. Microsoft can just wave its magic wand and build a community. And they shifted from Yammer to, and I'm going to get stumped on the new format, but it was Yammer forever, and they've shifted to another engine. We compete with them, and that's okay. But here's how we're different, is that we're independent. And so when I participated in the Yammer groups, Larry, conversations we've had in the past, I don't mind saying the vendor name, but you and I have had spirited dialogue over the years of StorageCraft, right? That you've been a StorageCraft partner, and then you've tried some other solutions. I believe recently you told me you've returned to StorageCraft. Larry, do you realize we can't have that conversation up on the Microsoft community groups? Does that make sense?
About storage or about backups and recovery?
Well, but at the vendor level, right? You see what I'm trying to say is that you and I can talk about, hey, you know, I'm picking on StorageCraft, and they're a friend of the family, but we can't have that conversation in a Microsoft forum, right? We're going to get our hands slapped.
Oh yeah,
because, they want to
go ahead. Recovery manager or something like that, or
yeah. So let's see, Gavin Steiner. Gavin, let's see. Okay, Gavin, all right. Gavin's saying, Gavin was at the original 2003 SMB Nation in Indianapolis. And in fact, we had a steak dinner, Gavin. So that first slide I put up about steak dinners plays well. He's saying, when did the kids get old enough that the children have girlfriends? Gavin, your second question that's more legitimate, if you will, is there anywhere we can view the April 30th session? Ginny, can you fact check on what April 30th was, or Gavin, if you can clarify? That was probably a different format for us, and apologies. George Montgomery, okay, here's a serious question for the entire panel. George Montgomery asked, is there any version of O365, Office 365, that's HIPAA compliant, or does something needed to be added to the package to make it compliant? Now, HIPAA would not apply to Dublin, Ireland with Larry Doyle. Yeah. Who'd like to tackle that? Josh or Joshua? Who wants to go first on that? We'll circle the horn.
I'll be happy to pass. I'm not very familiar with Microsoft 365. And was highly hopeful someone would actually explain what it was.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Josh, are you a HIPAA guy in a 365 world? It's okay if you're not.
Yeah, so the one thing that they do have is Microsoft has a good security center now that it sort of points the direction of what controls you can put in place to meet those compliance, right? It's not quite, I would call it a push button yet. However, it does guide you through what you can do, particularly in, say, the E3 and the E5 SKUs, right? So the E5 has the e-discovery, you know, the all of the legal compliance built in. It's just how do you use it to meet those HIPAA compliances? And the Security Center can guide you there. That's how you can get that information.
All righty, thank you. Scrolling down, we have Seth is asking a long question. Let me read it. Seth asks, any ideas to why Microsoft made the decision to exclude M365 business benefits from Action Pack? This seems a bit short-sighted from my perspective. I'd rather have this benefit and give up Windows 10 EMS E3 to assist with internal onboarding and customer deployments. I'll throw that out there. Mia Kate, I didn't mean to ignore your last question, by the way, but Mia Kate, maybe no one knows. Action Pack is a creature.
Well, I think he has a good point, because the Action Pack, I think he has a good point with that, honestly. I would be a little bit in agreement with that. I don't know what their motivation would have been on that, but you know, they are charging, you know, with the plugins and different things and the cost of the programs. It could just be a financial thing for them.
Yeah, yeah, I will.
I mean, it would be nice if they would have added it to the action pack, but I have a feeling it's a money thing.
Imagine that, a
Yeah.
trillion dollar valuation, and it's a money thing. Hey, Jenny, could you do me a favor and copy and paste Seth's question over into a notepad for me, and I will ping our friends in Issaquah, Washington, who are always helpful in answering our questions on the inside. Sydney Thornton, Sydney Thornton, I'm interested in the security audit. So, Josh Fryfield, I think you were talking security audit. Do you want to double click down into maybe what you do in a security audit space thing?
Well, I've done a few different things, so it depends on the tool I'm using. Mostly, though, I'm using rapid fire tools, like a lot of us are, to do that initial assessment of the network and then provide the results to the users. I've also done some enterprise security where I've worked with Qualix and Nexpos and some of the higher end platforms to do that. So it depends on what space we're talking about. But I think for SMBs, a lot of us are using the rapid fire tools approach. I think that's probably the most popular in our space to provide that. And they also have a HIPAA add-on for that as well that goes more into, say, HIPAA if you're trying to provide those types of compliance reports.
Yep. And they got acquired by, I'm going to say Kaseya, right? That was a Kaseya acquisition, I believe.
I'm not sure, but I do know that Kaseya just got a war chest to do mergers, or acquisitions rather. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, so if you're Kaseya listening, if you get to me by 5 p.m. today, I'm going to throw in the car. You can call me at 206-201-2944. The asking price is $55 million by 5 p.m. and I will throw in the car. Okay.
I think they just bought ID Agent, didn't they?
They did. They did. That was announced on Monday. That's a big deal. Okay.
Well, Harry, it certainly was Kaseya a few months back. Well, actually, it was really a couple of years ago, but they announced it a few months ago, 6 months ago.
Yep, it was a while ago.
They have picked up quite a few. They just grabbed ID Agent. It's M&A mania. But anyway, yes.
Well, yeah, but Joshua, you raise a valid point, because when I have my analyst hat on, which doubles as a party hat from Dublin, Ireland, when I have my analyst hat on, these are the kind of stories that I'm trying to cover, is the consolidation in a fairly mature market. And it's not wrong, right? Maturity is a natural act, and so we need to hit it head on. And so the Kaseya story, I'm actually doing some typing this couple of days because they have the Kaseya event going on right now in Las Vegas. So look for a little more coverage on that, folks. But that's the kind of stuff I want to cover as an independent community. And again, I would offer that there's some Microsoft communities, they cannot touch that conversation. That's not what Microsoft does. Let's see. Sydney Thornton says he makes a nice living working, getting companies data compliant. Thank you, Wade DeVore. Said thank you for some. We're gonna have some training up here. I'd love to see M365 SKUs in Action Pack. Wade, I agree. You know, Action Pack is this thing, and it's a mystery, and it's yeah, I agree. I'm not going to get going on that. Trust me, I have opinions about how they're handling Dynamics CRM. All right, so here we have Argelus Pina's asking, the individual says, is there a video for Microsoft 365 that shows details on adding computers to it and managing those computers? If this is replacing an on-premises domain for small business, I'd like to know the inner workings before getting anyone set up. So I have very good news for you, that we are posting up later. Let me go back to the site. I don't think we have it up yet. I'm going to answer the question in real time. I know it's in production, but the interview with Andrew Bettany, whose new book comes out in June, early June, on device management in Microsoft 365. So let's see. Yeah, Jenny, if you could put that on your high pri to get Andrew Bettany up today. Andrew Bettany is from York, United Kingdom. So Larry, you guys all know each other over there. I'm assuming you know, well-published author.
I don't actually know. I must look him up now. Maybe I do know him, but I don't think so.
I understand. He's more in the IT pro community, not the MSP community, and he's an MSP, MCT. Wade DeVore asked, hang on, we have a lot of questions. Okay, so Argilus, we got you covered on that, and we will do a shout out to that in the thank you email you'll receive tomorrow. So thank you for surfacing that, and his new book comes out in early June. Wade DeVore asked, I asked if we could get credit towards those SKUs and was told no. So Wade is double clicking down into the action pack conversation where they have limitations. Seth asked, the cost of EMS E3 in Win 10 Enterprise is less expensive compared to Microsoft 365 Business. Not by much, he goes on to say. So I get it, you know. Bundling, I view bundling as like my Comcast cable bill, and there's a lot of channels I don't use. I wish I could just buy the 10 channels I want, but you have to buy 250 channels, of which I don't watch the other channels. So the bundling concept does have, the economics are tricky. And I don't know if anyone on the panel wants to take that on about the cost of EMS E3 in Win 10 is less expensive compared to the M365 business SKUs, folks.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the E5 does add on more, to your point, it adds on more compliance, e-discovery, things that are not actually in E3. There are additional things in E5. So I think that's really what you're paying for as part of that bundle. I don't think you achieve the same thing with the two separate, the E3 and the Windows 10 that you do with the E5.
Okay. Let me move on. Seth, thank you for your clarifications. I'm going to put those, Seth, I'm going to put some of your comments over here. We have a lot of questions, so let me get some fresh ones. Gavin comes back to us saying, are small businesses using many of the tools in 365, such as Teams, Forms, are they still underutilizing what's available? So Mia Kate, I want to go back to you since you know, everyone on this call is out in the real world, but you in particular, with the office supply MSP company, the question is, are small businesses using many of the tools in 365, such as Teams, Forms, are they still underutilizing what's available? Go, Mia Kate.
Yeah, I think they very much are underutilizing what's there. I think a lot of times you set them up with that, and then, you know, they don't have an administrator that really understands it. So then you're spending your valuable time doing training on that because they get frustrated, at least in my experience. And we had over 1,500 clients. So, you know, varying different, every vertical that you can imagine. So I definitely think that they are not utilizing those. Lots of our clients didn't even know how to utilize SharePoint, didn't realize the cloud aspect of being able to, you know, work wherever they wanted, felt still compelled to be working in their office or on their laptop or whatever. So I definitely think it's underutilized and needs to be. You really need to get your clients on board with a learning program if they don't have one.
The rest of the panel team, I'm going to key in on Gavin's comment on Teams because in late June, we have a MSP Tech Talk segment on Teams. It'll be our second time we talk about Teams. Larry Doyle over in Dublin, Ireland, what is the acceptance of Microsoft Teams over on the other side of the pond?
I'm finding it pretty good, like especially with even with small businesses, like, they're all just like we're deploying it, and people are starting to use it, and they like it. I thought the interface was a bit funky myself originally, but it's growing on me now. And we have a provider that's backing off the zip trunks into and have a Teams connector. Hosted PBX solution. So that's great. That's working quite well too.
Joshua, Teams, any comments on acceptance?
Well, we're actually
not much. Oh, go ahead, Joshua.
Okay. We're just using it ourselves over the last couple of months. And I would point out that until you're good with it yourself, you're probably not going to market it. But I find that once we started using it and actually appreciating it, reaching out to some of our customers, they've gone out and started on their own and done some stuff with it we didn't even know about. So, and it's always those best 20% customers that actually leverage their IT and they don't complain about cost. They just use it and love the fact that it works. So I have found that we have more expert customers than we are, and I've got one of them coming over next week to sit down and show me what they're doing. So I think it's a great thing. I'm surprised that it comes on all the versions of O365, but it's out there and people are clearly starting to use it.
And folks, on the Teams front, you can go to LinkedIn and look up a friend of the family, longtime friend of the family, Todd Colbeck. Todd Colbeck on LinkedIn, and he has made a living with training resources on OneNote and now Teams. There, we'll use a little game. Todd Colbeck.
That's not spelling.
Colbeck. Colbeck. Yep. Friend of the family. Give Todd a look at what he does so well. Let's see. Milton Jones says E3 is an action pack. We have Argulus saying thank you, Harry. Man, this is the most questions in quite a while. I think we're on to something with, man, this Microsoft 365 might actually be a big deal. Seth asked, what about the comments? What about Windows Defender is better with AI components and M365 compared with the other players out there? Microsoft claims their results are better. So we're talking Windows Defender with AI components. Who would like to hit that one head on?
It's good. It is good. It's ranking quite high a lot of the time.
Okay.
They still like to have a third party. They still like to farm out the endpoint security. I find it quite good with the ATP, but it's not the basic Windows Defender. It has to be the ATP version.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good point because Seth actually appended his question and said the context of this is the Windows Defender ATP. So that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still feel that there's a case to be made for a cloud managed third-party solution that encompasses a lot more than just endpoints, antivirus, like, so you have the likes of Sophos or Bitdefender that has device control and edits and disk encryption, auditing, and management and stuff.
All right. Thank you. We have David Runda asking, I don't know anything about Teams, never seen it, never used it. What is it used for and what is the value proposition? David, I'll take a stab at it and then our panelists can pitch in. So I view it as Teams is a competitor to Slack, okay? And I'm a big fan of Slack. And I don't trust Microsoft with a lot of their new offers because they come, they go, they disappear. An example of that would be over in the telecom area with Microsoft Response Point. and now Teams is offering a telephony function. And so I don't trust Microsoft, and I have the right to say that. So I view Teams as a Slack competitor with a little bit, obviously, a lot more integration into Office 365, but telephony thrown in, and it's highly unlikely I'll use Teams for a telephony function. Go around the horn if anyone wants to tackle what is Teams and what is the value proposition.
Well, one thing about Teams is Microsoft is eventually going to get rid of Skype, right? So Teams is going to take over as Skype. Skype's going to go away. Teams is going to continue. And I guess, like you said, the Slack concept of having different tabs per se, different projects you're working on, that is all present in Teams. You can upload a file to Teams. You can share all sorts of things. So it is nice if you're doing project-based collaboration.
Yep. Yep.
I would say too that you could add more applications as well on Slack than you can on Teams right now.
With API integrations, that's probably true, because
the integrations are much higher on Slack.
Yeah, well, that's a valid point, because it comes from the quasi open source community where they're naturally rebels who want to mutiny, and so that actually makes good sense. Sydney actually pitched in a comment and didn't even know it in response to David Runda's comments about what is Teams. And he said there is a hazard with Teams because it uses shared documents, which can create a hazard to migrations. So thank you, Sydney. Don't know if any of the panelists want to talk about that.
That's actually a great point. I didn't think about that, but we did a huge migration of over 2 million pieces of data for a company, and I totally agree with that. Something to keep in mind.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Joshua.
Yeah. You mentioned something about telephony and Teams, and Josh said that Skype which is now Skype Business is going away because it hasn't been enough different things yet in 5 years. But honestly, we support networks, and for our businesses, those networks are effectively the water or the blood that flows through their veins. But telephones are oxygen to these guys. A phone system going down is possibly the only thing worse than a network or even email going down. The very thought that I might put responsibility for that in the hands of Microsoft, I can't even imagine.
I'm not going to do it. Yeah.
No, there is no level at which they will ever be culpable for the performance of their products. So we are in a Microsoft world, and we do eat Microsoft brand steak. And by the way, I don't eat beef either. But the reality is that it is not to anybody's advantage, as far as I can see, to narrow down your ecosystem, your entire business ecosystem, to one provider, much less that provider being Microsoft.
Yep. And we have a couple of comments I want to share. These are observations, but let me read them. Sydney, thank you for this next one. See the Code Conference keynote by Sadia for the facts about Office 365 SharePoint team adoption. It's huge. Sydney goes on to say, Team has Skype now for internal to the enterprise firewall. Sydney goes on to say, boy, Sydney, we got you on some caffeine out there. He goes on to say, check out how many apps come from the Microsoft Store for SharePoint 19, probably in response to Mia Kate's integration comments. That's a fair response. And then we have Milton saying Teams is the fastest growing app in Microsoft history with 330,000 organizations adopting. I agree. Now that, too many Sydney had too many Cheetos. That's why he's hyper. Milton Jones, I agree with the data, right? So we're data driven at SMB Nation, M365 Nation. You saw our survey data. We're data driven, and you're absolutely right. It is the fastest growing app. However, Well, yeah, there's no however. I can tell you this, the one time we did a Teams webinar with Jameson West of MSP fame and a couple of other guests, it was extremely well attended with an attentive audience. And that's how we can measure. We can measure engagement to impute what the popularity is. And so you're absolutely right, it's growing. Microsoft has a way of waving its magic wand and creating growth. But there's, like I say, I came up through the rank with Slack. And Joshua, to your point about telephony, I'm not going to turn that over to Microsoft. not not going to do. I get a little choked up about telephony because of response point. We are at the top of the hour. We can go longer. The typical format for MSP Tech Talk is 90 minutes. I do want to do a little bit of a sanity check here before people may have to leave. So one thing I want to do, I'm going to move on to the next page in my deck. And if you do have to leave, I want to acknowledge that and thank you for joining us. I want to have you consider joining Microsoft 365 Nation. We are working with a friendly sponsor to bring Thirsty Club to you. So this is Beer Fest, Beer Summits reincorporated. And what we decided is some people like beer, but everybody is thirsty. So Thirsty Club is their brand, and it has a better fit, and there would be more than beer. So keep your eye out for that as we go around to some cities this year. And then next week, my new book will be profiled, and I just want it to be May 15th at noon. Nia Kate was the technical editor on that. Jennifer Hallmark was the project manager. I just want to show you what that looks. I want to give you a perspective on what that new book is that the first book I did in 1998, and most people don't realize this was my first book, was Windows NT Secrets. And it was the option pack edition, and it actually came with Windows NT Server in the back sleeve on CDs when you bought the book. It was a 90-day version to learn the book. Then I had the book that most people are familiar with, the Teach Yourself SBS in 21 Days. That came out in 99. Fast forward the movie nearly, absolutely 20 plus years. And with the help of Mia, Kate, and Jenny, and a few others, Carl Palachek helped out. We have How to Be an MSP, and we're going to profile that next week. If you want to learn a little bit more, go to smbnation.com and click on the cover, and you can learn more about that book, but we'll certainly spend a lot of time on that next week, and we talk about the hottest, most cash-rich, well-capitalized vertical in North America. Now, let me look at some questions. Sydney offers Teams has a very small set of total SharePoint options that's simple and compact. Do we have any SharePoint people on the panel? Larry, Josh,
Nope.
Joshua, Mia, Kate?
Definitely not me.
I think he is right about that. He makes a good point about it because it is limited. If you really look at those specifics on it, I think the user experience too makes a big difference.
Yep. Josh?
Especially for like engineering companies, different people using that. He's right.
Yeah, SharePoint bedevils me. It's a relatively mature product, and it still draws significant attendance at the SharePoint events. Shout out to SharePoint Saturday that travels around, and it just won't frickin' die.
Yeah, and the people that don't know it and are introduced into it, new clients, and they get new people. Engineering, manufacturing, any of those using it, had an architecture firm, then those new people all have to be trained on it because they don't use it. But I think he's right. It is limited in that for Teams.
Yeah.
That'll probably change.
Harry?
Yeah.
Joshua here. So our experience over the years has been that everybody that thinks they have an interest in it is either scared off by the cost of developing what they want in it, or they get excited about developing custom software and decide to actually develop custom software, not a SharePoint app. And from
Very true.
you know, as a provider and an MSP, and before that, just an IT service provider, supporting SharePoint, and in particular, backing up and restoring it, has always been nightmarish. So now that that's pretty much gone from our portfolio, we're quite happy. I mean, years and years ago, we used it ourselves as a kind of a wiki and internal knowledge base. Then we moved to a real wiki, and now we've moved to IT Glue. But it is a phenomenal product, wildly overpriced, ridiculously complicated to set up on premise, certainly by design by Microsoft.
Yeah.
And as I said, by the time people get to the point where they really grasp what SharePoint can do for them, they're in the 5 figures of developing those SharePoint sites, and they're able to look at custom software.
Two thoughts that I've had with SharePoint is, number one, we use it. So we recreated company web from the SBS days. So we recreated the functionality of company web in our 365 instance. And part of that is we're a publisher. One of the things SMB Nation does is publish books and content. And what SharePoint does a really, really good job of is version control. Because boy, howdy, you don't want to edit the wrong chapter. Jenny and Mia Kate have just gone through this, and version control is harder than it looks, because Mia Kate, the last thing you wanted to do was look over chapter 2 on a weekend that wasn't the proper edition of chapter 2.
Yes, that's a really good point. It has good features. I mean, I'm not gonna. SharePoint probably does need to go away, but a lot of people use it. But I also think that he's right in that by the time people get into it and develop it for each of their specific corporations, businesses, whatever, they are into it pretty deep, and they usually don't have a deep team of people that really get into it without putting money into it and specializing in it.
Yeah, and my second observation on SharePoint comes from a SharePoint Saturday interaction. So here in Redmond, Washington, SharePoint Saturday is always like the Saturday of Halloween weekend. It's weird. I wish they wouldn't do that, but I always feel like, you finish it's SharePoint Saturday and it's either Halloween or it's Halloween tomorrow or something, but they travel the world. It's quite a good show. And what I took away from an interaction there about SharePoint is it's very political. And what political means is T-Mobile, a secondary mobile carrier, is based here in Bellevue, Washington. And it was a civil war in their IT department. So you had the on-prem SharePoint people who wanted to protect their job. Imagine that, Luddites. And they wanted to go and destroy the cloud because that was a threat to them. And one of the intersections, one of the battlefields was SharePoint. So, folks, if you haven't had the great joy and pleasure of working at the enterprise level, there are politics awaiting you. Josh, down in Southern Cal, I believe you recently did a tour of duty with some enterprise clients, and promise me, everybody just gets along like a functional family. Is that correct?
Oh, of course, Harry. Yeah, no. No, to your point, I mean that typical, the fiefdom, right? You see fiefdoms all over the place in enterprise. People trying to protect their silo, essentially, right? And sometimes things come along and those silos disappear, and people are not happy about it. So, that happens a lot. There's no question about fiefdoms being protected.
All right, we have a new comment from a Jim Wade. Sydney, I'm not ignoring all your wonderful comments. Some of these are more just affirmation about what we're talking about. Forgive me, Sydney. Jim Wade has a new observation. Jim Wade says, I am an ECM guy for over 25 years. I have implemented FileNet, OpenText, Highland OnBase, and other ECM systems. SharePoint has 95% of the functionality of these systems for $10 a user per month. It has to be configured, but so do other ECM systems. Valid point, Jim. this stuff doesn't happen on its own. I'll give you that. Any comments from the group on that? Yeah, is there true tele or auto-magically configuring databases out there, folks?
Well, I mean, the thing about SharePoint, sort of what Joshua was saying, is that you do get to a certain point where there's so much complexity in doing it that you build your own application, right? And when it comes to a comparison of an ECM provider, look, most people are going to choose something that's already pre-canned. Of course, no ECM is that easy, right? You've got to do your document templates and all that, but you're still not having to do quite as much perhaps as if you did that all in SharePoint. That in some cases, that workflow that you have to create, it's going to exceed the time that it takes you to do something that is a on-base or whatever, document management system that you're trying to use. So I don't know. That goes both ways, right? You could make an argument for and against that, using that as your platform for ECM.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when I got SQL certified, MCSE SQL certified in the late 90s, I was at a public accounting firm, and we were selling Great Plains Dynamics, and you had to have one guy who was an MCSE in SQL, and I drew the short straw. But you know what, Josh, it's really cool because I got my head into the world of data. And a couple of thoughts. One is old SQL Server people have now, instead of going off to die, we're now what they call analytics. Okay, so we were always working with data, and then it became big data. And that was a natural act. So that's one observation. But the other is, to be quite honest, I get lost in SharePoint. It's just so many hooks, and a little bit of this with Dynamics CRM as well. I just get overwhelmed and lost. And I got to tell you, man, SQL, it was just more straightforward. It was more command line. It was more stored procedures. I could navigate SQL, and sure, I had to go to YouTube and look at some books, but I get overwhelmed by SharePoint. I don't know if anyone has that similar psychological malady or not. Apparently not.
No, I think you're right. It's its own animal, right? And I mean, there is so much to learn, integrations, hooks. And then, I mean, one of the problems that SharePoint has is every version they've come out with, it's a bear to get it from one version to the next and migrate it. It hasn't been a seamless experience. As Joshua was saying, backing it up can be a nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. So folks, we're starting
to point out.
Yeah, go ahead, Joshua. Yep.
I mean, sometimes you would patch SBS and you'd have to run a
Your bandwidth up there, Josh. So this is Joshua. It's actually easy to back up. It's just damn near impossible to restore. But the and migration is always a nightmare, and the structure of it and what it was included with and at what level and what the feature set was in constant flux, and on and on and on. It's like they had an entire team of people dedicated to preventing the uptake of this product, and those people are the best employees at Microsoft. Okay, I'm done.
All right. Hey, a couple
comments. I totally agree about that too.
There you go, Mia Kate, and appreciate your
that
tales.
Brings back some really bad nightmares of migrations for a big, huge company here. So I agree. I think it's complicated, and people don't get into it far enough, and then they bail on it, and then they try to find something that the other Josh, I believe, said that's in a box that's more affordable that they can kind of roll out. Right? That's my opinion.
Yep. Gavin Steiner offers. Gavin, good to see your name again, buddy. Been a while. So Gavin says SharePoint is a spreadsheet unless you put more time into it than it is worth the return. It's a shame. David Runda says, I agree with Harry about SharePoint. I could never really get my brain fully wrapped around it. Sydney's back. Sydney says migrations in SharePoint are easy if you don't use shared documents. That's probably a valid point, but that's what I look for SharePoint to be, is a publisher. And I'm going to make a last call for questions. I have cleared the deck on questions. I realized there were some side comments up there as well. Thank you for those. I'm going to do a last call, folks. If you have any more questions on Microsoft 365, Microsoft 365 Nation, now's your chance. And we are going to continue this party. So that's part and parcel to why we have a big reveal today on this community. Sydney asked, how do I join O365 Nation? So Sydney, we have rebranded, for lack of a better word. A lot of the evangelical outreach I did for Office 365 Nation, we even had a fall conference called that. That is now Microsoft 365 Nation. And let me tell you what that means. One is we have a heck of a lot better website. Before, we were using a media play with what we call cardification, where the little stories appear as cards like this, and it was a strict media play. Now we have a site that is not, we don't wake up in the morning thinking we're a media integration company. We wake up in the morning thinking we're a community like Spiceworks, to be honest. But we're on the other side of the aisle. Primarily our audience are managed service providers and partners. And Spiceworks, I would offer, owns the independent IT pro conversation. They're my friends. So that's how we wake up in the morning, and we think you joining, please complain, please compliment, but please participate, that we can kind of have a redo here with some of the excitement we built with SBS. And again, we have upgraded the beer summits to Thirsty Club. So that's the good news. The bar just got better. David says, I'm new to Office 365. I've been very underwhelmed with the spam filtering. Is it just me, or does it actually suck? Who wants to take on spam filtering in the 365 world?
Well, I think that you know, it's sort of like we were talking about Windows Defender. At a certain level, I feel that it's sort of like the fox guarding the hen house, right? I mean, people are going to design spam that gets around Microsoft's filters. That's what they do. They know that's their target. So I think there's still a lot of room for other providers in that space. So you send your MX to them, it scrubs it, then it sends it off to Office 365. I'm not seeing any less of those solutions. I'm really seeing more of them, whether it's you know, something like a Mimecast or Mail Protect or whatever it is. There are a lot of them out there. So I wouldn't say everyone is enamored, to his point, with Office 365's built-in filtering.
Yep.
I agree with that. You know, like Mimecast is huge. It's still going to be offering additional features like other providers as well, like much better auditing and proof of delivery and stuff. And then you've also got, in the unlikely event of Office 365 going offline, you can still replay and get business continuity on your email with the likes of Mimecast or Reflection or something like that.
We use Mail Protector here, which we used back even in the days of Exchange on premise. So continuity, extra parts to the suite, such as encryption and archiving if you choose it. But for us, the big thing is that they don't do any perimeter nuking, so there's no dropped connectivity. All messages are recoverable. And I believe, as Larry said, much better logging and the ability to easily determine why a message was tagged as spam. I can't really say much about the integrated Microsoft mail filtering, other than it's not really even as good as the integrated graphics on the Intel chips. It's probably good enough to legally call it mail filtering, but that's about it.
And just as Larry, I still have my analyst hat on from the pub in Dublin. So when you see this, you know I'm an analyst. But what I liked about today, and Sydney, I see your kind comments still crossing the screen. Thank you. I believe we did have a beer at one of our beer summits. I agree. But what I like about today is I think we captured the spirit of Microsoft 365 Nation, where you are, as we say on the West Coast, you are permitted to poke the bear. I don't own Microsoft stock. That's my analyst comment. Probably wish I had. But, you know, that's what's going to make this community fly. And hopefully long timers on the call will appreciate that's essentially what we did with SMB Nation. Was I would periodically get called on the carpet in Redmond. And I always had a defense, Mia Kate, I always had a defense when I got called on the carpet. And do you know what that was? I'll tell you. Well, you've worked with me, so you've already seen this in me, but I hid behind attention deficit disorder. I said, I am hyperactive. And I have Tourette's syndrome, and sometimes I just blurt out.
Yes, that's what we love about you, though.
And it's a great legal defense. All right. So I'll tell you what, we're going to go ahead and do a wrap, folks. I see several people are now dropping to return back to work. So first of all, to our panelists, I want to thank you for being contributors to the Microsoft 365 Nation. Again, the good news is, folks, we're not making our panelists and contributors type. We have discovered they would rather talk. They like talking better than typing. So you're going to see more video content popping up periodically. Please, please, please join our community at M365 Nation so we can stay in touch with you. Again, get your compliments and criticism. Wade DeVore, love to have you make suggestions on training nuggets that we can do that, again, training that Microsoft cannot do, and that would be third-party integrations. So with that said, everybody have a great, great day. And Jenny, thanks as always in the radio control room. See you next week for the book review. Next Wednesday at noon, we're going to look at the new book.
Great.
All right, nice to meet you all.
You too.
Ciao, Bella.
All right.
All right, Stan, lad.
Oh, Jenny needs her cue. Jenny, have a great day.